We've been doing Marigold Live since it started at the beginning of the pandemic. Actually, we did sort of a week of sessions. I think Trina was on at least one of them. Um, and it became a fun way to bring people together to share knowledge. So we're really grateful. We see a lot of the same faces, which is always fun, and new faces coming through. We're going to have lots of opportunity for Q&A and to engage. We really encourage that. We're here to take your questions. What we can't answer, we can take offline. And all of our speakers are excited to be here today. So I'm going to throw to you, Tara, to kick us off with a land acknowledgement and some introductions. And we'll just want to switch up the pins on the screen there to pin you up front.
Okay, so welcome everyone to Marigold Live Budtender Insights by Tether. We're very excited to connect and celebrate with you all today. As Katie mentioned already, we have some special guest speakers. So I just wanted to give a quick introduction to Trina Fraser, who is partner at Brazo Seller Law, Kathy Riley, who is the CEO of CanExpo, and Ryan Roach, who is Executive Director at Lake City Cannabis. So I'd like to start off with a land acknowledgement. As we gather in this virtual space, we acknowledge that the ground beneath us, beneath our feet, is historically the home of Indigenous peoples. Marigold is based in the Halton region. Halton, as we know it today, is rich in history and modern traditions of the many First Nation and the Métis. We acknowledge and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for being stewards of this traditional territory. We also recognize the enduring presence of Indigenous people on this land. We encourage you to research and honor your own Indigenous history. We'd also like to quickly recognize and thank the who came before us and fought for cannabis legalization in Canada. In Canada.
Awesome. Thanks, Tara.
No
Great. So we have a jam-packed sort of 90 minutes together. We're going to go through the Budtender Insights presentation. It's our second year doing this survey. We saw some small differences over last year and some interesting nuggets that are really helpful for really anyone focused in the space. After that, we're going to move into an Ask Me Anything with Trina and Ryan. So Trina, everything, marketing to budtenders, compliant questions, also not legal advice, but some guidance based on what we see in terms of Health Canada and the laws we need to adhere to. And then Ryan, deep knowledge of the industry in terms of being one of the amazing vocal retailers that has 2 shops on his own, deals with lots of budtenders himself, and has lots of perspective on how they are being treated and what's valuable. So Tara, perhaps we could get going and we could throw to the presentation. Oh, I'm sorry. I went through half of the agenda. After the Ask Me Anything, so please get your questions ready. And so think about the types of things you want to ask in terms of legal and retail. We're going to hear from Kathy from CanExpo. We're really excited as both Marigold and Tether to be part of CanExpo coming later in March. And Kathy's going to take us through making the show so unique and some of the interesting brand and budtender opportunities that are to be available. So we're really excited about that. And I missed my own introduction, so we'll get the presentation pulled up. But my name is Katie Pringle. I am the CEO and co-founder of Marigold PR and Tether. We have been in this space since 2016, which is quite a long time in cannabis. And we've worked with over 120 brands. So we've really seen sort of all facets of the industry. Tether came about as a solution for our clients and brands that were looking to engage directly with budtenders. Because we know budtenders are so core to decision making, they're the face of the industry, and really from a general Canadian consumer perspective, they are the front lines. And so thank you to some of the budtenders that have joined us today as well. We're for your voice in the survey and also today. So yeah, again, for those just joining us, make sure to throw your name in the chat, give us your social handles, let us know where you're from. We'd love to engage with you and connect with you. So Budtender Insights, this is our second annual Tether survey, and we're really excited and proud. Want to back one up, please? So we're grateful for everyone for sharing their input. So want to move forward just there one. So Tether launched in August 2021. We're currently a community of over 3,000 Canadian budtenders across Canada. Our goal is to reward and engage budtenders through content marketing, events, in-person and virtual, and samplings and swag drops. And so a little bit later, we're going to get a bit deeper into sampling through the presentation. And then also we've got quite a few questions from both the audience and questions ourselves with Ryan and Trina around sort of what this looks like, because even more than last year, it's really rising to the top as a core piece for everyone in the industry. Here are some pictures here of our last year Budtender Appreciation Week, which we're really excited about. That's coming up March 20th. Want to move forward one, Tara? Mm-hmm. We've got our light schedule here, which Tara, do you want to run through some of the exciting things we're planning for Budtender Appreciation Week?
Yeah, so we're really looking forward to it. We're already doing a whole bunch with the events. So we've got a whole mix of events, starting with a virtual sesh. We have surprise retail visits, sampling in, excuse me, in Ontario to budtenders. And then we plan to end on a high note with the Tether Budtender and retail gathering at CanExpo. And we're really, really looking forward to this. Kathy from CanExpo will be speaking a little later. But if you want more information on this particular event, you can go directly to the CanExpo website, which is canexpo.ca. In addition to that, we'll be putting it all over our social media channels, as well as CanExpo will be as well. So just follow along to make sure you don't miss any of these amazing events. And here's just a quick snapshot of last year's B-Week partners. And we still have some space for this year coming up for partnership. So if you're interested, we would love to connect. And we can, in the chat, we'll of how you can connect with us. And so here we're just introducing the B-Week Advisory Committee. It's the 2023 version of last year. So we have many new faces as well as returning faces from last year. We're very thrilled to have 9 people on board this year from all parts of the bud tending industry, as well as from across Canada. We're so grateful to have this advisory committee on board because they help us shape and build the programming and the events for B-Week. And you'll see here just in the pictures, there's Ryan, who will be speaking a little bit later.
Great, so over to our survey. So similar to last year, we executed an online survey with over 300 Canadian budtenders. We ran the survey from September to December, and we did incentivize the survey a little bit, a chance to win a $150 gift card. We did Uber Eats instead of Visa gift card because that was what was most popular. And we were really appreciative of the answers. It was great to see how many engaged people we had really off the hop, and then the ability to include some new voices was really relevant for us. Really, we'd like to highlight a few things that were different from last year before we go through the data. So something we talk a lot about as a concern in the space is budtender turnover and how difficult it really is to train and keep great budtenders. And a highlight that we found really interesting is that we saw a 19% increase of budtenders that had been working in the industry for 1+ year. And you'll see we divided that data out into even under 6 months, 6 to 12 months. And so budtenders are becoming more experienced, which is, I think, is really exciting and promising for our space. Something we found interesting about our survey respondents is that it was actually up 10%, 67% identifying as female. We can talk a little bit more about what that means, but not unusual for a community to see a higher ratio of male to female participants. We saw an increase of budtenders looking for management roles, and career development remains top of mind. They're looking for and seeing more job perks across the board. So that was a big thing we heard last year is, they're interested in swag, they're interested in samples, they're interested in additional benefits. And what's nice is we're seeing a slight increase across the board in sort of all of those categories. The number of budtenders looking to make connections locally continues to rise. And again, this is from our community. So just that caveat that if you're already part of the community, probably more engaged. But we're seeing 93% of our respondents looking to make those connections. Overall interest in events and rep visits, that comes up a lot. So for any of the territory reps joining us today, something to consider. We're also seeing, an additional interest in smaller remote markets. This is something we talk to a lot about our clients. Sometimes we can be a bit Vancouver or Calgary or Toronto centric about our thinking. And we have to remember there's quite a bit in terms of other markets out there for engagement. Another nugget here is around, though 80% vape, so the vast majority vape, they really are flower traditionalists, which is what we saw last year. So we'll dive into that a bit. And there's a continued interest in packaging reform and sustainability, which was up 8%, which we'll dive into. And this last line item has been something that is expressed across the industry, sort of at all levels. Really something that's hitting on everyone's core values. So when we look at our audience, 58% were from Alberta. That's quite reflective of both the Tether audience and the population. We saw a nice chunk from Alberta and then a smaller piece from BC, and then 3% the rest of Canada. And I will be honest, we struggle a little bit with engagement out east. And so we're looking to dive a little bit deeper into that. I think where the provinces exist with the government stores, that also can be a little bit of a barrier to engagement in some ways, but something we're looking at exploring. 93% are under 45, but that being said, when we look, it's 35%, 26 to 35. We've got the female piece that we've already mentioned. Again, we're a community, which does tend to bring out a larger female skewing audience. In terms, just social communities in general tend to attract that. But I do think this is an interesting nugget I'd love to talk more with retailers about, just to understand, is this what we're really seeing in store? I know where I shop, it is quite female dominated. So it's kind of an interesting piece. And then the other piece to remember about our audience is 37% are either store managers or that small portion of license holders. So we've got quite a range of experience of people who identify as budtenders, whether they're running the shop, they're a manager in the shop, perhaps they're responsible for purchasing, all the way to someone that's really working 1 to 2 shifts a week. So it's quite a variety of commitment levels and personalities that are in the space. This is quite similar to last year. 55% of budtenders feel they are fairly compensated. And so we've got the two charts here. I know if you can't see our talking heads, you can bump it around if it's easier to see the graphs. I'm moving you over here. I thought something quite interesting from the hourly rate piece is that as many people are seeing $17 an hour as those that are seeing $20 an hour plus. So it's quite the disparity. Again, we've got some managers in the mix, so increase in responsibility makes a lot of sense. But from a wage perspective, the sentiment across the board that we were seeing from some answers is, of course, while many feel they are fairly compensated, they are looking for additional opportunities to move forward. I was at LIFT last weekend and had some really interesting conversations with a few people who let me know that there are some retailers that have adopted tip functionality within their stores. And so I think that's an interesting nugget to talk about. I don't know, we'll get to Trina and Ryan a little bit, but I don't know really where that sits in terms of adoption rates or compliance. But the message there was that some of the budtenders were making $50 more per shift, depending on the day, which is really interesting from a kind of service industry perspective, and also what we're seeing kind of nationwide in terms of tips sort of popping up in places we may not have expected them in the past. And so this is the sentiment that was echoed from last year. Seeing some stores offer $14 to $16 an hour for budtender roles is unfortunate. Our job requires a lot of knowledge and care for clients, higher wages, and a focus on supportive management and non-toxic work environment should be a starting point for all stores. So, increase in wages is top of mind. The amount of education required for the role is also top of mind when budtenders are asking for these pieces. Apologize if this is a little tricky to read, but this sort of goes back to the notion that budtenders are traditionalists. They enjoy, when we look at their preferred method here on the right, joints and bongs, and then way last, we've got dab rings followed by the rest of it. A joint and a bong are by far and away the most preferred method for consumption. When we look at their actual behavior, they are engaging across the industry, across different media and types of whether it's extracts or whether it's oils. They're trying topicals. This was an increase over last year. Really weren't kind of resonating at all last year. And so we're seeing higher numbers there. But really, I think one of the most interesting things is where the vape cartridges sit, where the vapes sit and where the edibles sit versus their preference. And so this is something important to remember when you're talking to budtenders, that their personal preference means a lot in terms of how they sell. And when you're asking them to try outside of their personal preference, which really looks to be almost anything other than flower, you just need to be considering that. And it all layers up into sampling and the ability to try stuff that they may not be purchasing themselves.
So this is about social media, one of my favorite parts. Sorry, let someone in here. And so we find in general that Canadians are a little bit more hesitant to talk about their jobs, specifically when it comes to cannabis online through their social media channels. However, you'll see 73% of budtenders surveyed talk about their jobs on social media. So as you can imagine, that makes them an extraordinarily important advocate for products and for the industry in general. Just a little fun note, there's two images here on the side. So one on the left is Nicole. She is absolutely hilarious on Instagram and on TikTok if you wanted to follow her. She's also she's part of our advisory committee this year as well as last year. And then we have Maddie on the right, who is from Lake City Cannabis, and you'll be hearing from Ryan later about how they love to use their social media channels for reviewing products. And just a little note about that, a quote that we received through the survey is, "I love spreading knowledge about cannabis and teaching others. I've been a budtender for over 5 years, and I'm so grateful I'm able to obtain a manager position. I feel fulfilled and passionate about my job. I would love to attend and get my staff to join a budtender event. We need to start looking at budtenders across the community as allies, not competition." This sentiment actually is repeated a number of times as we go through the quotes. And so another part that we learned here as well is that oftentimes we hear just through different events and stuff that budtenders don't really want swag. Maybe they have too much or they're not interested. However, through our survey, we found that 63% of budtenders see swag as a job perk. 55% see or are receiving rewards and sales incentives as job perks, and then 42 are getting samples. So something to consider here, as Katie actually already touched on, is that we really do need to consider areas that are less remote, or sorry, that are more remote, less larger cities like Toronto, exactly like Katie mentioned. And then another little important note here is that sampling is up 10% from last year. Okay, so switching gears slightly into personal cultivation. So of the budtenders that we surveyed, you'll see that 35% of them want to grow in the future. 30% of them are currently growing, and 27% of them have previously grown. These percentages are significantly higher than the non-budtender community across Canada. However, their reasoning for not growing is generally the same from what we've been hearing is lack of space, lack of education, equipment, money, time, often people living with them that may not be interested, and so on.
Thank you. So, what do budtenders want? They want education through experience. And this is something that we saw last year. And we've seen an increase in experiential type of events across Canada, some that have been hugely successful. Budtenders take accountability for their own product knowledge. And so when we look at the ways that budtenders learn about the industry and learn about products, number one is online research. And so that's really at their own desire to be doing quite a bit of online research. The number two way that they learn about products is through brand ambassadors and store visits. Brand ambassadors that are on the call and territory reps, I hope that this is validating and feels good to you, because that is where budtenders are learning. And then the other area that the two other areas that is quite relevant to them are their personal purchases and sampling, again, and then word of mouth and customer feedback. Really, if you put those two together, like it is a significant area. And we heard some sentiments too around some of the areas that if a budtender isn't someone that enjoys topicals or edibles, being able to get that word of mouth, which we can support with some great marketing, and that genuine customer feedback will do a lot to help educate that budtender to help them talk about that product. One of the sentiments, again, keep coming through. Don't forget about the different areas throughout the country. Industry events in some smaller markets or some engagement in smaller markets, I think would go very well first on a bit compared to some of the sentiments that we've seen. And then, we thought this one was really interesting. We need real cannabis knowledge, not just what's cheap and potent. And we definitely know what's selling really well in the space right now is high THC at a low price point. We understand that that's a brand position for a lot of brands out there, and also what budtenders are very comfortable leaning on, because when you think that you're selling something of good value and that's how it's positioned to you, that's a nice category to be leading into. But again, this speaks to expanding knowledge and expanding brand education opportunities to budtenders to follow all of the different formats and categories, especially if your brand or your product is living in one of those areas that is a little bit more difficult for them to talk about, or a category that isn't one of their most favorite. When we look at what is your preferred way to learn about new products, this is similar but switched up. So personal purchases and samples rises to the top, brand ambassadors still number two, and then online research comes to number three. Customer feedback is sitting in the same kind of place. So again, they want to try the products. They want to know that the products are great, but they're also very happy to hear from brands and marketers engaging with them in a way that they feel is valuable. And if you have a sample and you're a brand ambassador, you're sort of covering top two all the way. Again, not to harp on sampling, but we'll probably continue because it's so relevant through this dialogue. And then again, through Trina and Ryan's conversation, we'll have a conversation about how challenging that can be in markets, especially outside of Ontario, where it's very difficult or impossible, depending on how you view the laws and regulations. This budtender is telling us they need the capability to try every product. Unless you're spending your own money, it's difficult to understand. And, this one here pointing out, I only smoke flower. This is something that comes up quite frequently. So it is difficult for those who have a preference for flower to also, spend their own dollars on edibles and pre-rolls and topicals. Experiential education is top of mind. This is something that is similar to last year. The closer the event is to cannabis itself, the more relevant it is to budtenders. I know that sounds like common sense, but based on some of the activities we've seen, perhaps it's not. Sommelier sessions, really important. Cultivation tours, let them in, let them see what you have going on. We've done both virtual tours and in-person tours, and it's incredible to hear the depth and breadth of the questions and knowledge that budtenders have about the plant, about how it's grown. Really get your growers in front of people if possible. That is something that is ranking really high. And again, budtenders have amazing questions. If you make we need the events to be cannabis friendly, like a puff and paint or a joint rolling workshop. Those are still ranking high. The further removed it is from cannabis, like axe throwing, the lower it's ranking. That being said, we've seen some really amazing events that are really on brand for those who are hosting, and some of the Tether events that we have hosted. And as long as you're creating something of value for the budtenders, at the end of the day, they're going to be interested in joining you. But the closer you can make that event to actually cannabis related function, the better. And again, budtenders want sampling and swag. We just wanted to show this as an example of our B week last year, Budtender Appreciation Week. We worked with Fuego. We did a sample drop or a swag drop for them across the country in some of their key markets. And budtenders were extremely engaged, very happy. They felt very grateful to be receiving the products. And so swag is ranking high. Like we said, 62% of budtenders view it as a job perk. And then, of course, sampling where possible. And so there's just some sentiments here as well. So it's a great way to think about if you're launching a brand, collaborating with us or doing it on your own, but getting your products or getting your swag in front of budtenders in your key markets is a great way to launch your social handles and sort of elevate that brand from the ground up. This kind of fits. Joe just posted a comment about growers love to show off their grows. So yes, budtenders want cultivation tours and education sessions. They want to see the girls, like take them to the farm. They want the tours. They're very interested. And in all honesty, consumers are quite interested in that as well. But from a budtender perspective, they whether it's indoor or outdoor, whether it's aquaponics or a simple nothing simple in this industry, but a small micro. They're interested in being a part of what you've got going on. And we host tours, but we also really suggest that you look at hosting tours yourself on an ongoing basis. Yes, Joe, Teresa Merriwell, she's amazing. I'm not sure if she's on the call today, but she is a client and a friend of ours. Education sessions. We worked with the Career Foundation last year, which is really fun. They have a free education program funded by the government for those interested in learning about cannabis. It's a cannabis worker training program with paid placements. So that was really amazing. And I also think, awesome that it's funded by the government and all about careers and moving careers forward. So they were interested in talking to budtenders about moving their careers forward, which we'll touch on shortly. Budtenders told us, we want to be appreciated. We're overworked and hardly recognized for everything we do. We got lots of positive sentiment, but there's a bit of that too. More than a bit of it. Like the education that's required to work in this industry is significant, and to be able to feel like you're doing a good job. And so, Budtender Appreciation Week is one foot forward in terms of making budtenders feel appreciated. But across the board, as a retailer and as a shop owner, if that's your role, there's lots of opportunity there as well. They have told us they want virtual events, and they're coming out to virtual events. And so this has been a really fun way to engage budtenders nationally. We know what it's like rolling out SKUs across the country, and how that can work from a timing perspective. And it's a bit of a bumpy road. So, once you're at a point where you're in a couple markets, being able to host a national virtual event has been awesome. The budtenders very much enjoy access to founders, growers, and even brand representatives. Sabine from Bazam has been amazing on some of these. We've got Jen from Mana, who took us through her story. The budtenders are very engaged with these types of events, and the ability to get the inside scoop on the brands and to be able to ask the founders, growers, and brand representatives direct questions. And we're always really impressed by the knowledge that they're always coming in with, and the types of questions that they have. And then, a sentiment here: I love my dream job. I'm glad to be a part of the growth of my community and whatever struggles we have. It's the continued journey that gets us to better times. I'd also love to have a weed farmers market, but one dream at a time. I love that sentiment coming from a budtender, and so being able to provide smaller versions of these farmers markets through some interesting events and brand engagement opportunities is a win. And then in-person events. So we've worked with lots of different brands, including Live, to do Budtender events in different locations. It's been a lot of fun. Also some really educational focused events, which have been fun. And so depending on what your brand represents and what your shop represents, it gives you an opportunity to bring the community in and work collaboratively with brands like Tether or other communities to build these experiences that budtenders want to talk about and be a part of.
So another thing that budtenders want that they told us was career and industry advancement. To review this slide here, it's 81% of the budtenders surveyed are interested in pursuing a career in cannabis. One thing to note here is, I would say, like, the numbers aren't on here, but I guess over half of the pie of the people, I guess 81% are interested in, and then others, and then I guess a quarter are happy as being a budtender. Areas that cannabis industry can improve on. So we've mentioned a couple of times here, packaging regulations and sustainability is number 1, 2, and 3. Education, price, and building a community are also very important. And then sort of lower down the list is understandably access and patient support rank lower as concerns, though many budtenders do share frustrations about the difficulty of wellness conversations. So sometimes find it a little difficult to share medical advice or medical feedback when asked in store. Another thing that budtenders have mentioned that they want is community. So 86% of budtenders are interested in engaging with other budtenders. And just a note from the survey that we received, we need a sense. Sorry, there's lots of people coming in. We need a sense of community. Different retailers treat us like competitors instead of people providing the same service. And then here we have 78% of the budtenders surveyed are currently engaged in the industry through community events. Events need to be cannabis consumption friendly. So 85% of the budtenders that were surveyed said that this is an important fact. So it's something to consider if you are planning on hosting an event. Something else to consider if you're planning on hosting an event is over 53% of the budtenders surveyed are not very interested in alcohol. I found that an interesting piece of information there.
So some of the key takeaways today, there were lots, and we see some of the questions in the chat. We will be sharing the recording, but the key takeaways as we see it is that budtenders are influential and passionate. They're industry advocates, and budtenders take pride in their role. Budtenders are interested in education through experience and sampling. Community is important to budtenders. Enter Tether. And talent ahead. Over 81% of budtenders surveyed say they want to advance their career in cannabis. And so, you know, these are very similar to what we saw last year, but we're also seeing a deeper network of those that have put in a little bit more time and who are moving their careers forward. Cannabis, one nugget we sort of missed was around the fact that there was an increase in those who were interested in cannabis retail management. So I think that's exciting too, as the retail landscape has been changing quite a bit. And again, back to that kind of first point where we talk about turnover, you know, our hope is that these types of communities and the brand and the experience that retailers are providing for their staff, along with perks that brands can bring to the table, that we're creating this amazing role across Canada that's going to continue to evolve. So that's it for our presentation here. Happy to do a couple questions in the chat. I didn't have my channel during the presentation, so I'm catching up a little bit. And some of the comments about cannabis over alcohol and beverages. I think that's interesting. That's something maybe Ryan, you could speak to a little bit in just a minute, sort of where that's sitting and where beverages are sitting with your team. Okay, so bold growth, thank you. If there are any budtenders or anyone from the Saskatoon area, they're looking to offer a facility tour. And so those are always amazing. It's always so interesting to see everyone's different technology. So if there are any, cannamixology. Okay, why don't we just share all these amazing opportunities? That's really fun. Cannamixology on the beverage front. Thanks, Thomas. We actually saw quite a bit more of that. So Manna Maple Sugar is one of our clients. They have a infused sugar product, which is really unbelievable and really tasty. And then we've seen some other kind of drop opportunities and some sweetener opportunities that we've seen come out. So it is interesting to see sort of what's going to happen in the beverage landscape. And also Trina can speak to the ability to sample beverages and engage with beverages at events. So why don't we why don't we bring up Trina and Ryan, then we going on the Q&A portion with them, the Ask Me Anything. So we have a few questions for Trina and Ryan. Some came from us, some were submitted in advance. And so we're going to kick off with those. But Tara's going to help me trap some of the questions in the chat. So, questions for Trina Fraser, Canada's top cannabis lawyer, throw those in. It's a great opportunity. And then questions for Ryan, who's got so much deep knowledge around the retail landscape and really understands his stores, his community, and what his budtenders are looking for. So a really great group here. So thanks so much, Trina and Ryan, for joining us. I did a quick butchered intro about you guys, so why don't I let you take the floor for a second and tell us a little bit more about yourself. Over to you, Trina.
Oh, I won't bore everyone. I'm a lawyer. Cannabis, all things cannabis. That's all you need to know.
Okay, Ryan.
Yeah, so Ryan Roach, Executive Director, Lake City Cannabis. Yeah, we have two shops here in the Southern Alberta area, one in Chestermere, one in Calgary. We do lots of social media. We do lots of business-to-business work. We do tons of unrequested opinions about random things. But yeah, other than that, I have a super big passion for this business. I've been bud tending since right here at the store since very early days. So since legalization kicked off. So I've seen a lot of things in and out and up and down. And so, yeah, definitely excited to answer any questions or share anything or be of a use at all.
Awesome. All right, so the first question we have here, so I'm going to run through them. If you guys have questions, you can throw them in the chat. I see one from Thomas already. Thank you. And we'll go through them all and get there in just a second. So Trina, so one of the big things that's coming up is, again, through the survey and also through brands that are looking to engage, is around sampling. And so for the provinces that allow sampling, what are the general guidelines and who are they allowed to provide sampling to?
Sure. So this has been a really interesting issue that's evolved quite a bit over the past year, because there is this intersection of federal and provincial laws and regulations at play when it comes to samples. We know that federally under the Cannabis Act, it has all these restrictions on what you can and can't, mostly what you can't do to promote cannabis, but also very clearly says you can't give it away for free. So we know that samples to consumers are off the table anywhere in Canada. But the federal act also says that none of these prohibitions apply if we're talking about giving away cannabis for free as part of a promotion from license holder to license holder, effectively. So between producers and retailers, for example. So that's why we have a blessing from Health Canada. But Health Canada also says, of course, you have to follow the rules of your particular province as well. So most provinces have said no to samples, and the rationale behind that is mostly related to inducements, the notion that to maintain a level playing field and to not allow bigger players with deeper pockets to be able to, buy market share effectively, that they had to put a prohibition on anything that could create these conflicts of interest and prefer one producer's products over another. However, some provinces, we've got Ontario, Saskatchewan, Newfoundland, and Yukon are the four jurisdictions in Canada that have basically said explicitly yes to samples or acquiesced to them. I will say that when I had a survey done across the country, and New Brunswick and Nunavut didn't respond. So no response whatsoever, but everybody else, they either said no, or it's pretty clear, like obvious from their their retail manuals or their actual legislation or regulations that they don't permit samples. So Alberta and BC, for example, it's explicit and it's very broadly worded as far as receiving anything of value as a retailer or an employee of a retailer. So in the provinces where you can, the guidelines vary a little bit from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. So you just basically have to be very cognizant of, you know, where are we talking about, and make sure you're following, like, very odd, like in Ontario, for example, there would be no prohibition on providing samples directly to employees as long as you've taken some reasonable steps, employees of stores, so budtenders, as long as you've taken reasonable steps to actually confirm that the people you're giving the samples to are in fact budtenders. They're there as representatives of the retailer, but in Saskatchewan, you can't do that. You have to provide the samples directly to the retailer, and the retailer has to account for the receipt of those samples to their regulator. So, you know, just it's following the rules of the particular regulators that you have to abide by.
So super simple, straightforward,
Yeah.
easy to follow.
As always with everything cannabis related, a complete mishmash, a mishmash across the country. Yeah.
Yeah. Federally legalized, but provincially controlled. So that is confusing for lots of reasons. But Ontario has seen an influx. We've seen some amazing events. You know, Kind comes to mind in terms of some of the cool things that they've done. And we've seen some brands pushing the boundaries, and you know, we'll see where it all lands, but it is exciting for those opportunities. So Ryan, you're in Alberta and you can't sample there, but you have brand reps coming in all the time and you try to provide experiences for your budtenders. So can you talk about how can you or do you approach sampling with your team?
Yeah, so I mean, it becomes a very difficult process here in terms of the sampling side of things. Like Trina was alluding to, Alberta's no bueno on rep to owners or rep to store sampling. So that one's pretty clear on that. Internally, though, you know, we take great pride in it here, and it also, I mean, there's a lot of factors in terms of why we do it, but we make getting access to new products or trying out products or anything like that a pretty high priority as a retailer. If our budtenders try it, if they know about it, if they can see it, touch it, feel it, you know, it makes it a lot easier for them to talk about it, and then that information is passed on to customers. So we take a kind of a multifaceted approach. One, you know, the easiest one is we offer discounts to our budtenders in terms of acquiring flower. The second is that we retailer will purchase different products and give those to our budtenders and let them have it, you know, one way or another, if it's at our shop or if we go to another place or have access to something, then, you know, we're sharing that across the board. And then we've created sort of an internal review process here for our staff, where we get into a chat group and we review the stuff that we're given and just give like really easy details about it. Like, what did I notice? How did it look? How would I rate it? 1 to 10, tastes, all those things. It doesn't need to be crazy for them, but because we also want it to be fun, but enough to share information backwards to the rest of the team. So we have this real good community internally that allows us to talk more about what we're getting. So it's a super, super important part of what we do that makes sure that customer service element, and also makes it a hell of a lot easier for budtenders to do their jobs. So
That's awesome. And, you know, it's good on you for establishing that with your team in order to kind of have that feedback loop and be able to take everyone's preferences in mind. Because we're all a bit self-serving when it comes to preferences. It's a bit hard not to be. So great to get that kind of 360 experience.
yeah, and we encourage them to try different things and be open to different experiences and stuff like that, and go from there.
Awesome. We have a little bit of banter in the group here around, Trina, maybe this one's for you. Can licensed retailers sell non-cannabis products, not from the OCS? And so there's a couple opinions here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think the answers that have been given are generally correct. I mean, we're talking about, if we're talking about Ontario, the rule is you can, I mean, initially retailers could only sell cannabis products and cannabis accessories, and cannabis accessories has a defined meaning in the act. That was later broadened to also include just cannabis related items, right? Like t-shirts, hats, cookbooks, you know, as long as there's some sort of connection to cannabis. So, you know, you can't necessarily sell like bicycles and frisbees, but you could sell you know, cannabis related magazines and books and other related items. So I've heard various kind of stories about how loosely or strictly inspectors from the AGCO interpret that. But you have to be able to draw some sort of connection to cannabis to sell it in Ontario. And obviously the rules about what you can sell are unique to each province.
And so we see some dispensaries selling snacks and drinks like cans of Pepsi. And so does that ever fit in any province?
Like, again, it would depend on I don't know that any province explicitly allows that. And in fact, I'm pretty sure many prohibit it, but it would be a provincial matter to look at.
Jeff, frisbees are rolling trays. Sure. I'm just flipping
Oh. I was using it in a generic sense.
That is a funny fact there. But and then Thomas has asked twice here around grow equipment. So where does grow equipment fit in terms of what you can and can't sell?
Yeah, I mean, that would be something that would be cannabis related. So, you know, in Ontario, for example, that would be fine. It's the promotion of it is an interesting topic too, because grow materials and supplies were actually initially in Bill C-45 for legislative nerds like me. It was included in the definition of cannabis accessories. So there was going to be restrictions on, they would be caught up in all the promotional restrictions of the act. And that actually there was some heavy lobbying efforts by, I think, some very large players in the, you know, fertilizer and community and whatnot. And that was actually removed from the definition. So you are actually free to promote the sale of cannabis growing products, but not, because they don't fall into the definition of accessories.
Huh. Interesting. You can tell I haven't worked with a lighting company in a while, but I'm like, okay. And then Ryan, over to you. Like, talking about marketing, you guys have done such a great job building your brand, engaging your team to build your brand across social. Do you want to talk a little bit about that? Some of the challenges, what's been working for you?
Yeah, I mean, the social media landscape for cannabis is super difficult. You know, at least once every few months, you know, Instagram goes on a banning spree, or TikTok goes on a banning spree, and accounts are getting killed left, right, and center. So it's definitely not an easy process to navigate social media. And we've kind of figured a few key points of ways to avoid being flagged by those particular social media companies, you know, not using words like sale, using very like loose descriptions. These days for Instagram, it seems a little counterintuitive for Instagram, but photos are basically no bueno. You cannot put photos up. You'll get ripped pretty quick, and they'll get taken down. You might get warnings. You might just get straight banned. So we use videos primarily on Instagram as a way to educate and as a way to tell people about new products that are exciting and fun. So that's been kind of a bigger part of what we do. TikTok has been not bad for that either, but you got to figure out the little bits and pieces to avoid getting flagged on there as well and taken down. So it's this constant sort of like cat and mouse game with them. But it's been big for us. Our customers love it. It's been great for them to access really great education and information. It's a way to keep excitement up and try different things. But it also allows for an opportunity to include our staff. So we always encourage our staff to try out their social media as well. Some are really into it and some are definitely not. And that's super okay. We don't mind, you know, it's not a requirement to. But somebody who you spoke about earlier, Maddie here, who's really grown her social media profile. She's using her social media. But we also make sure that she jumps in on ours and she can use our platform as well to go over the things that she has. So it's a great way to expand the way people view that your social media platforms and gauge different ideas and opinions and thoughts. What resonates necessarily with me may not necessarily resonate with someone else who maybe Maddie more appeals to, or some of our younger staff or older staff or whatever. So it's a great way to be a little bit diverse and give a lot of other opportunities. So we really enjoy that part of that. I saw someone kind of jumping on YouTube. We've dabbled with YouTube. YouTube is like ridiculously strict, but we have a new strategy for YouTube that we're going to be trying to launch later this year using their quicks. So we'll see how that goes.
Thank you. Yeah, you guys do such a fun job. And, we know there's a lot of cannabis marketers in the group. You're not just dealing with Canadian laws and concerns. Facebook and Instagram have their own rules around what they view as compliant content for their platforms. And TikTok seems to be more friendly. There are still challenges. But LinkedIn is actually a platform that is quite cannabis friendly. It's not as relevant for all retailers and for brands engaging on LinkedIn, but it has been quite successful in terms of driving reach and engagement, especially in the B2B space. So over to you, Trina. Can we talk a little bit, while we're talking about social, while we're talking about marketers, just sort of like ambassadors, working with influencers, what can we do as brands in the space? What is compliant in terms of engaging influencers?
This is usually linked to the prohibition in the federal act on promoting through the use of testimonials and endorsements, right? So we know we can't do that. So, I definitely have had clients who have tried to be very creative to work kind of around that prohibition. And there's no, that being said, there's no restriction on people just organically posting about things that they like, right? I can talk about, to the extent that a social media platform allows me to put that content on there, there's certainly no regulatory restriction on me just being a super fan of a brand and talking about it incessantly. The problem arises where I am being compensated in some way by the brand to do so. So, the safest route to be able to get that type of influencer exposure is to turn them into super fans, if you can, without compensating them, which I understand is difficult, but that's really the compliant way of kind of getting that exposure. Doesn't have to be money that you pay them in for it to be problematic. It can be compensation in any form. So it's a tricky one that, if you just pay for their travel expenses, give them a meal, show them a good time, is that consideration in and of itself? These are all kind of getting into the gray area now, where I'd say kind of, a less risky proposition, but not necessarily a no risk proposition. So, it's certainly, if your influencers are putting out posts about your brand and they are tagging them as being ads, that's going to be problematic. If it's just, them talking about how much they love you, then, less likely to be a problem.
Yeah. Awesome. I feel like we could go on forever with questions. I have one last one for Ryan, kind of a little bit outside of what we've been talking about, but when we talk about budtender turnover and we talk about the future of the industry, what's your advice? You have an amazing team, and you seem to have done an amazing job fostering that team. So what's your advice to the industry around keeping great budtenders?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough industry right now in terms of there's just an array of challenges that exist for retailers and growers that really translate downstream to budtenders, and they feel a lot of those pinches. The last year's been tough because budgets get tighter, staff training gets less involved. So really, what we've always focused on is making sure that we have an environment where budtenders can, one, feel successful, they're engaged and are able to have successes in their day-to-day, respecting their opinions, getting their involvement in the day-to-day operations, understanding what they're doing, but also looking at their compensation. I mean, at the end of the day, everybody's got bills to pay, so we try to pay above average rates. You alluded to tips earlier. That's been fantastic for our teams. We try to make it fun for our customers. So instead of blatantly just asking for tips, we usually have jars set out that have your monthly question of, during Christmas, it was like, who's your favorite Christmas character? And you can vote in there, and then we pull the tips at the end of the month. So that's been a nice way to have that. We do offer benefits to our full-time employees, so that we offer medical, dental, and a few other things as well for them, which we feel is above retail standards, and what's possible. So we think that's a big one. And then we just try to have a great team, all in all, having the right ideas and the right minds, and cohesive, people that are kind of on the same page. So yeah, that's been a big part of engaging those bud tenders. And so far we've been successful. We've had our follies for sure. Alberta's been a tough market. Yeah, the number one tip war.
Yeah.
Maddie wins a lot. I think we did the number one bud tender, and Maddie won here locally. So you can give her a shout out. She beat us out, including me, which was very frustrating. But yeah, it's just about doing that, and engaging with them on a human level. I spent a good amount of time in corporate, the corporate world, or pre-cannabis, and we just didn't really want to engage in that world coming in. We want to do something a little bit different, and we've had some success with that. So also, I'll take this moment to plug this. If you're in the Calgary area and you're looking for a job in bud tending, our Calgary store is hiring for a night shift. So hit me up, drop in the DMs. Would love to talk to you.
Awesome. And where can people find you, Ryan?
Well, right now, not on my website because that's down. So I'm dealing with that while I'm talking to you guys. But you can find me on Instagram, social media. You can find me on TikTok. You can definitely hit me up on Twitter, or you can just straight up call the stores or come by. Or as soon as the website's up, there's a lot of links in there. But info@lakecitycannabis.ca is a really great way to email us and get a hold of us.
Awesome. Thank you. And Trina, where can people find you if they're looking for some great legal advice?
I mean, I'm on LinkedIn, I guess, a little bit, but mostly Twitter. Don't love being on Twitter these days, but I'm a dog and I'm having a hard time convincing myself to move elsewhere. So yeah, that's most of my social media content that is cannabis related is on Twitter.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. We could have gone on forever, but I already know that I'm over time as per usual. So thank you so much. We've got until 3:30 with the group, and we're really excited to introduce Kathy from CanExpo. Marigold and Tether are engaging in CanExpo this year. It's going to be a really fun event, and I'm going to throw to Kathy to tell us a little bit about CanExpo. When's it coming? Give us the overview, could you?
Okay, so CanExpo is a consumer cannabis show taking place at Enercare Center Exhibition Place, March 24th to the 26th. It's also for budtenders and retailers because we are going to be showcasing all the new products. The Budtender Day with Tether will be a lot of LPs and brands will have their new products that are coming to OCS in the following month. So during that event, there'll be sampling and lots of opportunity to network. The program for CanExpo, there's two audiences. One will be the consumer. There'll be a lot of stage events for consumers, everything from parenting and cannabis with safe storage, seniors and CBD. We're trying to bring a new audience to cannabis. We're also trying to take the stigma out of cannabis by normalizing it somewhat with the different events that are going on. There's going to be one of the most exciting things is the actual cooking competition. We'll have one per day. So the first day will be confectionery and baking. The second day is mixology, and the third day is dining or main course. And we do have a celebrity judge booked so far, Jordan Wagman. We think that it's going to be amazing. We also are doing influencer awards, cannabis influencer awards, and you can go on our website and see and nominate your favorite influencer. We've had a lot of response to that already. So that's there'll obviously be exhibitors. Tether buds will be there. I guess that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, thank
Admission-
you.
Oh, sorry. Just one other thing. The admission is $20. Unlike other events in the industry, it's totally patterned after the consumer show model. So the exhibit space and the admission are both reasonable.
Thank you for that. We're going off script here, Kathy, but I think it's okay. I started that. So one of the notes here is around what makes CanExpo different than other conferences with the OCS grant. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Right. Okay. So the exhibitors in the show are in the retail end of the industry. So there's no manufacturing and packaging growing. The show targets just consumers, budtenders, and retailers. We have
Equity grants that you
oh,
guys.
sorry, the OCS. I know, sorry about that. OCS had generously sponsored 10 diversity companies into the show. They've all been selected now, and they're so excited to participate in CanExpo. We'll be doing a segment on stage to talk about that as well. And OCS will be there with their new education program. It's not age gated on their website. So anybody can get, any age can get information they need about cannabis. And that will be at the show as well. They are bringing in some of their consultants to help people who are thinking of getting into the cannabis industry or trying to get their product into OCS, which can be a long, involved process. That information will be readily available in their booth.
So fun, through that equity grant, we're going to see a variety of brands that we haven't been able to see at some of the shows before. So it's going to be a nice mix of companies. So what kinds of companies, Kathy, should be considering joining CanExpo and getting a booth?
Well, basically anything you could buy in a retail store. So LPs, craft, accessories. One great thing about the show is you can sell at the show. So if you're an accessory brand, you can sell your accessories. Of course, you can't sell cannabis or THC products, but there's so much more. We have people with cannabis jewelry, clothing, organic clothing, hemp clothing, I guess it's called, and a lot of services. And then we have a lot of unique people who make handcraft different things, like one company that has handmade wooden boxes and storage boxes. So there'll be a lot of booths that you haven't seen at any other show, and products that you haven't seen at any other show as well.
Awesome. Well, and we talked a little bit before the event today, and Kathy's going to offer a promo code for everyone. So we'll send that out in a follow-up email with the promo code, so you're able to access an even further discounted ticket. And then there'll also be more information around the Budtender retailer event that's happening on site. So we're really excited about that. We see some comments here from Joyce. She's got some links to cannabis retailer. Thanks for joining us, Joyce, around some great products. And then Joe is mentioning around, the seniors conversation for cannabis and CBD, which I think Kathy will be, really interesting at the show. Anything we missed, Kathy? Anything you want to touch on before we head off today? Where can everyone reach you?
Well, Kathy with a K at cannexpo.ca. The website is cannexpo.ca. On Instagram, it's at Cannabis Toronto, CanExpo Toronto, sorry. So I also put my contact information at the top of the chat.
Amazing. Thanks. Thanks so much. So before we go, if anyone wants to throw their information into the chat again, thanks, Kelly. She's threw your details in there, Kathy. Again, thank you to everyone who's joined us. We're so grateful to have representatives from across Canada, from across the industry. Thank you, Trina and Ryan, for the Ask Me Anything. I feel like we could have gone on forever. And thank you so much, Kathy. We're so pumped to be partnered with Can Expo. It's going to be a really great time. So we will send out the recording. We will send out the deck. And if you need anything, you can reach us at Marigold PR, or I'm at Katie Pringle on social, always available. And you can find me on LinkedIn too. So thank you, everyone. Have a great afternoon. Bye for now.
Bye. Hope to see you all at Can Expo.